Well, new at 5, Governor Newsom's executive order triggering a flood blockade at the Tulare Lake Basin.
Tonight, more water worries in the South Valley. Tulare Lake is back and expected to grow with all the snow melt in the coming weeks.
Cracks have been discovered in the vicinity of Tulare Lake in California, prompting the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, to issue a rare and serious red alert. The designation has heightened tensions across the region, as experts scramble to assess what this means for the environment, infrastructure, and surrounding communities. This revelation, unsettling as it is, carries echoes of deep geological unease that may point to something far more complex and dangerous beneath the surface of the Central Valley. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. Tulare Lake, once the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi, has for over a century lain mostly dry due to human intervention, irrigation, and agricultural diversion. In recent years, heavy rainfall and snowmelt have caused the lake to re-emerge temporarily, refilling vast portions of the ancient basin. This dramatic return of water has placed new stress on the region's soil and subsurface layers. When cracks began to form along the lakebed and adjacent farmland, initial assumptions leaned toward ordinary subsidence. But as the fissures widened, patterns emerged that alarmed scientists monitoring seismic activity in the San Joaquin Valley. The cracks were not only longer and deeper than typical soil fissures, but appeared in configurations that suggested tectonic influence rather than mere surface collapse. Some cracks extended over several kilometers, with displacements of multiple inches, in areas previously considered geologically stable. What concerned the USGS most, however, was the irregularity of these faults in an otherwise flat basin and the proximity of these cracks to known fault systems, including secondary branches of the San Andreas Fault Network. USGS scientists began an immediate investigation, deploying portable seismic sensors and using ground-penetrating radar to map subsurface changes. What they found painted a worrying picture. The rehydration of the lakebed, combined with significant tectonic stress in the region, had led to the awakening of deep-seated faults that had been dormant for centuries. This, coupled with tremors previously dismissed as aftershocks of distant quakes, now appeared to be part of a growing sequence of local seismic unrest. The cracks, it turned out, were more than surface scars. They were the visible symptoms of a system under stress. The issuance of a red alert by the USGS is exceedingly rare and not undertaken lightly. It signifies a significant threat to life and infrastructure, demanding immediate governmental and public attention. In the context of Tulare Lake, the implications of this alert suggest the potential for severe seismic activity or geological transformation in the near term. Such transformations might include sinkholes, soil liquefaction, fault rupture, or even the sudden resurgence of water across the basin in ways that could overwhelm local defenses and infrastructures. What makes this development particularly concerning is the region's transformation over the past century into an agricultural powerhouse. The once dry Tulare Lake bed has become a patchwork of farms, irrigation canals, roads, and utility infrastructure. The rediscovery of cracks through this terrain threatens not only economic activity but also the safety of the thousands of workers and residents who depend on it. If the soil collapses or a significant quake occurs, the impact would be catastrophic, not just in terms of property damage but also in food supply disruption, water contamination, and long-term ecological damage. The situation has also rekindled long-standing concerns about the practice of overpumping groundwater in the Central Valley. For decades, agriculture in the area has relied heavily on subterranean aquifers, with massive amounts of water withdrawn each year to support irrigation. This has led to measurable subsidence, where the land literally sinks as underground water reserves are depleted. The new cracks discovered near Tulare Lake may be evidence of stress between surface land and collapsing subterranean cavities. In some locations, seismic equipment has recorded creaks and groans beneath the earth. Noises that, according to experts, are the signatures of Earth under strain. Geophysicists involved in the study of the cracks point to the potential interplay between rehydration from seasonal flooding and weakened subsurface strata caused by decades of water extraction. The refilling of the lake, paradoxically, might have exacerbated stress points. The pressure of new water on top of weakened layers can create a kind of geologic piston effect, pushing down and squeezing already compromised sediments. This effect may contribute to the widening of cracks and the deepening of fractures, potentially destabilizing larger segments of land. Moreover, the cracks pose a significant threat to the integrity of flood management infrastructure. The levees, dams, and diversion channels designed to manage occasional lake resurgence were built with historical assumptions about stability and predictability. But if the cracks shift or spread unpredictably, they could undermine these protective structures, resulting in uncontrollable flooding that would sweep across farmlands and into communities with little warning. The broader implication extends beyond just flooding or subsidence. Geological models are being rerun to assess the potential of a larger seismic event. The USGS has not ruled out the possibility of a moderate to large earthquake centered near Tulare Lake, something not previously considered probable. The lake basin has traditionally been viewed as seismically quiet compared to regions near the San Andreas or Garlock faults. The appearance of cracks, combined with low-frequency tremors, challenges that assumption and demands a reassessment of regional risk maps. Residents near Tulare Lake are understandably anxious. Though most are used to natural cycles of flood and drought, the suggestion of deep geologic change is something new. Emergency management teams are preparing for a variety of scenarios, including mandatory evacuations, the sudden closure of transportation corridors, and the interruption of utility services. Already some roads near the crack sites have been closed, and signs of sinkhole formation have been reported, adding urgency to the response. Agricultural operators face a grim calculus. Should they continue operations under the looming threat, risking equipment and workforce? Or should they suspend production and brace for worst-case outcomes? Many are choosing caution, especially those whose fields have shown early signs of instability. There have been reports of irrigation lines snapping as ground shifts minutely, and some irrigation canals have collapsed partially due to subsiding banks. In a broader ecological sense, the emergence of cracks is drawing attention to the fragile balance between human activity and natural systems. Tulare Lake's periodic return was already a reminder that nature has not forgotten its history. The cracks drive home the point that attempts to dominate or reshape natural landscapes can carry long-term consequences. Whether by over-extraction of groundwater, alteration of river flows, or suppression of natural lake cycles, the cumulative pressure may now be finding release. Hydrologists are also raising concerns about what happens if floodwaters re-enter deep cracks. There's potential for water to disappear underground, infiltrating unknown subsurface systems and potentially destabilizing land far beyond the visible basin. These unseen aquifers, if filled too rapidly, can cause blowouts, sudden eruptions of mud and gas that resemble geysers. While rare, such phenomena have occurred in geologically sensitive regions under similar conditions. Geologists working with the USGS are particularly interested in whether these cracks link to a larger system of faults running beneath the valley floor. If confirmed, it would alter decades of assumptions about Central California's seismic map. The potential connection to deeper fault systems would suggest that the Tulare Lake region is not merely a passive basin, but an active geological node. That redefinition would have wide-ranging effects, not just on emergency planning, but also on zoning laws, insurance frameworks, and land use regulations across the San Joaquin Valley. Adding to the complexity is the fact that many of the cracks are appearing in patterns that suggest movement over time, not just sudden ruptures. That implies a dynamic process, possibly ongoing, with a timeline measured not in weeks or months, but potentially years. This is especially alarming for planners who may have believed that once this year's flooding receded, things would return to normal. Instead, there may be a prolonged period of instability with slow-moving but relentless changes to the physical landscape. While the cracks themselves are silent, their implications roar across multiple domains: geological, hydrological, agricultural, and social. They hint at a region in flux, a place where the Earth is shifting not metaphorically, but literally. The red alert forces a reckoning, demanding attention to the delicate interplay of human ambition and natural equilibrium. This event is not just a warning about Tulare Lake, but a broader message about the fragility of engineered stability. California has always been a land of extremes: earthquakes, floods, droughts, and fires. The Tulare Lake cracks add another dimension to this legacy, illustrating how even places long considered dormant can stir and surprise. The ground beneath the Central Valley, often seen as fertile and fixed, is revealing its hidden dynamism. How society responds, scientifically, politically, and practically, will determine the scale of the consequences. Communities will have to adapt to a new reality. It may mean accepting that some areas once reclaimed from nature will return to their original state. It may also mean re-engineering infrastructure with an eye toward flexibility rather than permanence. Roads, utilities, and levees might need to be rebuilt not as rigid structures but as adaptable systems capable of withstanding a moving Earth. The cracks are not merely geological. They are symbolic fractures in long-held assumptions about control, stability, and permanence. Tulare Lake is reminding everyone that its story is not over, and perhaps never was. The land has a memory, and that memory is now surfacing through fault lines and fissures that demand more than curiosity. They demand action, caution, and above all, respect for forces far older and stronger than any human planned. The red alert issued by the USGS following the discovery of cracks in the Tulare Lake Basin has brought forth a multitude of urgent questions not just for geologists, but for policymakers, engineers, farmers, and residents across the Central Valley. As the scientific teams continue to study the origin and progression of these fractures, one growing concern is how this phenomenon could redefine the structural behavior of sedimentary basins under extreme hydrological stress. Tulare Lake, historically shaped by ancient river flows and glacial runoff, sits atop an intricate web of stratified sediments, clay layers, and interbedded aquifers, each of which responds differently to stress, moisture, and seismic energy. As cracks form and expand, they may cause displacement across different layers at varying depths, a process known in geomechanics as differential settlement. This can have long-lasting and devastating effects on infrastructure that is not built to accommodate such inconsistent movement. Roadways may tilt or buckle, rail lines could twist, and bridges spanning once dry tributaries may suddenly find their foundations compromised. These are not instantaneous failures, but slow brewing degradations that quietly undermine the very arteries of commerce and community. Civil engineers are increasingly concerned about buried utilities, pipelines, fiber optic cables, and sewage conduits that were never designed with active Earth displacement in mind. Unlike areas in coastal California where seismic activity is a given, the infrastructure in the Tulare Basin was built under the assumption of stability. Now that assumption is crumbling, quite literally. Cracks that penetrate through the upper crust risk rupturing buried gas lines, disrupting power conduits, and allowing contaminants to seep into previously sealed water systems. If seismic activity intensifies or further fault movement is detected, the cumulative effects on infrastructure could cascade into regional crisis. Environmental scientists are also probing what the crack formations mean for the ecosystem. Tulare Lake, when flooded, supports migratory birds, aquatic species, and rare wetland flora. The stress-induced cracking of the ground may lead to uneven water pooling, creating dead zones where oxygen levels drop and aquatic life suffocates. Simultaneously, some cracks could form natural drains, rapidly diverting water into subsurface voids, which would desiccate shallow pools before they can establish seasonal biological cycles. This instability in water distribution is disastrous for habitats dependent on consistency and seasonal rhythm. Moreover, these cracks risk exposing long-buried toxins. Decades of intensive agriculture in the region have left behind layers of pesticide residues, nitrates, and other pollutants in both surface and subsoil sediments. As the ground splits open, there's a tangible danger that such contaminants could leach into local water tables, which supply thousands of residents and farms. The destabilization of these layers, long kept inert under dry soil, could resurrect a silent form of poisoning that spreads through irrigation systems and well water. Adding to the complexity is the geopolitical weight of water rights in the region. The Central Valley operates under one of the most contentious and finely balanced systems of water allocation in the country. Cracks that alter the course of canals or interfere with the distribution networks of major water projects, like the Central Valley Project or the California State Water Project, could trigger legal battles between counties, irrigation districts, and urban utilities. Water distribution relies on precision engineering, and any tectonic deformation threatens to throw that balance into chaos. The economic ramifications are staggering. The Tulare Lake Basin lies within one of the most productive agricultural zones in the world. It provides a significant percentage of the nation's fruits, vegetables, dairy, and nuts. Should the cracks continue to expand, insurance companies may deem the area uninsurable, forcing farmers to halt operations or relocate altogether. Even before such drastic steps are taken, the presence of fractures complicates the logistics of planting, harvesting, and transporting goods. Vehicles risk becoming stuck, equipment can be damaged, and planting rows may become misaligned as the earth subtly shifts beneath them. Further compounding the situation is the role of climate change in escalating the instability of regions like Tulare Lake. Prolonged droughts followed by unusually heavy precipitation events place immense cyclical stress on land. The soil becomes desiccated and brittle, then saturated and heavy, causing deep tension changes that are not always visible until a fracture forms. Climate models indicate that California will continue to see these extremes intensify in the coming decades. Tulare Lake may very well serve as an early warning of how changing climatic patterns can awaken latent geological risks in places previously thought to be geologically benign. This has implications for how disaster preparedness is approached statewide. Traditionally, emergency response in California is concentrated along the coast and in mountain fire zones, but now, attention must be redistributed to the inland valleys, where earth movement, sudden inundation, and hydrological anomalies are proving just as hazardous. The Red Alert may well be the first in a new chapter of Central Valley risk assessment, where environmental monitoring, civil defense, and urban planning must incorporate seismic variables not previously accounted for. In light of these developments, data gathering has become a high priority. Drone-mounted LiDAR systems are being used to monitor ground movement with millimeter precision. Satellites are tracking changes in elevation across the basin. Teams on the ground are collecting seismic signatures in an attempt to determine whether the cracks are part of a deep fault reactivation or a shallow crustal deformation caused by surface dynamics. The level of coordination required is immense, drawing on multiple federal, state, and academic resources to create real-time models of the evolving situation. And while the data paints a picture of a stressed system, it is still incomplete. A major unknown remains the depth of these cracks. If they are superficial, limited to a few meters, they can be stabilized through engineering interventions. But if they extend kilometers into the crust and intersect fault zones, then we are looking at a geological phenomenon that may signal tectonic reorganization. That in turn has implications not just for Tulare Lake, but for seismic activity across the western United States. Subtle stress redistributions in one part of the crust can ripple across fault lines, triggering activity in unexpected places. In terms of academic research, the event is generating intense interest in the global geoscience community. Sedimentary basins like Tulare are often studied as stable reservoirs for resources like groundwater, oil, and gas. The appearance of dynamic cracking challenges the assumption that such basins are seismically inert. Researchers are now exploring whether similar behavior might emerge in other basins worldwide under the combined pressures of hydrological stress, over-extraction, and climatic fluctuation. This has elevated the Tulare Lake Basin from a regional concern to a globally relevant case study. One particularly novel concern involves geothermal dynamics. Though not a hotspot like the geysers or the Salton Sea, the Central Valley does possess localized geothermal gradients. Should cracks allow surface water to infiltrate deep geothermal systems, there's a theoretical risk of hydrothermal alteration, leading to ground heating or even phreatic eruptions, steam-driven explosions that occur when water encounters hot rock. While remote, the risk warrants attention, especially if fissures begin emitting unusual heat or gas signatures. Community leaders are now grappling with how to communicate these risks without inciting panic. The visual drama of long, splitting cracks is difficult to ignore, and in the age of social media, misinformation spreads quickly. Some have speculated about sinkhole collapses swallowing entire fields or the formation of new lakes that could flood nearby towns. While worst-case scenarios, such visions are based on real geological mechanics, and thus public concern cannot be easily dismissed. Clear, transparent communication from scientists and officials is critical in maintaining trust and ensuring preparedness. One of the most overlooked consequences may be the psychological toll on communities. Residents who have lived in the basin for generations are being asked to consider the possibility that the land they've known as stable and predictable may be undergoing irreversible transformation. This undermines not only physical safety, but also the mental framework through which people understand their environment. The cracks become metaphors for insecurity, a feeling that the ground beneath one's feet is no longer reliable. The cracks have even influenced political discourse. Legislators are now being pressured to allocate emergency funds, reevaluate zoning laws, and revisit outdated geological surveys. Some are calling for a moratorium on deep well water extraction in the region until a full geological mapping can be completed. Others are demanding state and federal intervention to reinforce vulnerable infrastructure before it is too late. Political momentum is gathering around a new understanding that the Central Valley can no longer be treated as a passive landscape. It must be studied, monitored, and protected with the same rigor as California's more famously volatile regions. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Tulare Lake cracks? Do you expect a major disaster? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.